You might be the most capable person in the room. You might have the best idea in the meeting, the clearest thinking on the team, the most relevant experience in the conversation. And none of that will matter if the way you speak is quietly signaling the opposite. Here's something most people never consider. Your reputation isn't built in the big moments. It's built in the small ones. The way you phrase a request, what you do when a conversation goes silent for 2 seconds, how you respond when someone compliments you, whether your sentences end with a period or a question mark. These micro moments happen dozens of times every day, and they are adding up to a composite picture of who you are in the minds of everyone around you. And for a lot of genuinely capable people, that picture is significantly less impressive than they deserve. Today, we're going to talk about 5 specific communication habits that destroy authority. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, consistently, in ways that are almost invisible until you know what to look for. And here's what makes this so important. These habits feel completely normal. They feel polite. Some of them even feel like virtues. That's exactly why they're so dangerous. You can spend years undermining yourself with behavior that, on the surface, looks like consideration and humility and warmth. Let's get into it. The first one is something that speech researchers and linguists have spent a lot of time studying. And if you've never heard it named before, you're going to start noticing it everywhere within the next 24 hours. It's called uptalk, and it's the habit of ending statements as if they were questions. Most people who do this have no idea they're doing it. It's not a conscious choice. It's a pattern that developed gradually, probably starting in adolescence, probably as a way of softening statements, to avoid coming across as aggressive or presumptuous. It sounds like this. You're in a meeting making a point, and instead of saying the project timeline needs to move by 2 weeks, you say the project timeline needs to move by 2 weeks, with your voice rising at the end, turning the period into a question mark. Or you make a suggestion and then immediately fold it into a question. I was thinking we could try a different approach. Does that seem reasonable? As if the idea itself isn't allowed to stand on its own, without requesting permission to exist. Or you issue what should be a clear request, but deliver it as an inquiry. Would it be possible for you to have this ready by Thursday? When what you actually mean is, please have this ready by Thursday. Now here's the psychology of what's happening beneath all of this. When you turn statements into questions, you are doing something very specific. You're handing the other person evaluative authority over your own words before they've had a chance to receive them. You're essentially saying, I have an idea, but I'm not sure it's good enough to just say it plainly, so I'm going to ask your permission to have it taken seriously. You're building the possibility of dismissal directly into your own delivery. And people respond to that signal, whether they consciously register it or not. When your voice goes up at the end of a statement, the listener's brain categorizes what they just heard as uncertain, tentative, provisional, something that can be overridden, something that needs their approval. And the person who speaks in clean, level declaratives is automatically perceived as more confident, more competent, and more worth listening to, even if the content of both statements is identical. The fix is deceptively simple. It is not easy because the habit is deeply ingrained, but it is simple. End your sentences going down, not up. Period. Not question mark. Make a decision about whether what you're saying is a statement or a question, and then commit to that structure completely. If it's a statement, deliver it like one. If it's a request, make it direct. Please have this to me by Thursday. I need this completed before the end of the week. Not, would it be okay if maybe, whenever you get a chance, you could possibly? The words you choose matter, but the shape your sentences make in the air around them matters just as much. The second habit is closely related to the first, and we actually touched on its opposite in our first episode. But it's worth going deeper here, because it shows up in a specific way that most people don't recognize as a problem. It's the compulsive need to fill silence. Picture a negotiation, or a difficult conversation at work, or a moment where you've just made a statement, and the other person hasn't responded yet. 2 seconds pass, 3 seconds, 4. And for most people, something happens in that gap that feels almost physical. A rising discomfort, a pull to say something, anything, to to close the silence, to explain more, to soften what was just said, to check whether it landed, to apologize for the awkwardness of the pause itself. And so they talk. They add qualifications. They walk back parts of what they said. They fill the space with noise that dilutes the impact of everything that came before it. And in doing so, they lose every single time. Here's what silence actually is, when you understand it correctly. Silence is pressure. When you say something meaningful and then stay quiet, you create a vacuum that the other person has to fill. Their brain experiences the absence of sound as a form of demand. They feel the need to respond, to engage, to fill the space themselves. And the person who speaks first into that silence is almost always the one who's more anxious, which means they're the one who's given the other person a psychological advantage. Think about the people in your life who have always struck you as authoritative, who feel like someone worth listening to when they speak. Almost universally, they share this quality. They're not in a hurry. They say what they have to say, and then they let it land. They don't nervously decorate their statements with filler. They don't rescue the room from quiet. They let the quiet work. The filler words, the and you know, and I mean, and so. Anyway, these aren't just imprecise language. They're audible anxiety. Every time you deploy one of them, you're telling the listener that you're not entirely comfortable with what you're saying or how you're being received. You're narrating your own insecurity in real time, and people's confidence in you calibrates down accordingly. The replacement for filler is not better words. It's nothing. The pause where the filler would have been is almost always the more powerful choice. It gives you a moment to think. It gives your words a moment to breathe. And it signals, without any effort at all, that you are someone who is comfortable taking up space in a conversation without needing to apologize for the silence. Let the quiet sit. It's doing more work than you think. The third habit is one that often masquerades as likability, and in certain social contexts, it is likable. But in professional settings, in negotiations, in any environment where you need to be taken seriously, it chips away at your authority in a very particular way. It's the self-deprecation loop, and it's worth separating it from actual humility because people confuse them constantly. Genuine humility is accurate self-assessment. It means knowing what you're good at and being honest about what you're not. It means being willing to say, "I don't know," and meaning it. It's a form of intellectual integrity, and it earns respect from people who are paying attention. Self-deprecation is different. Self-deprecation is using your own flaws and failures as social currency. It's the reflexive move to make yourself smaller, as a way of making other people more comfortable. It's, "Oh, I was just lucky." It's, "Don't mind me, I'm not that smart." It's, "I can't believe they let me be here." It's the nervous laugh and the wave of the hand when someone acknowledges something you did well. And here's the problem. When you treat yourself as lesser, you are not being modest. You are training people. You are running an educational program about how you should be treated. And the curriculum is built on the lesson that you don't hold yourself in high regard, which means they don't have to either. Think about the last time someone gave you a genuine compliment. What did you do with it? If you deflected it, downplayed it, explained it away, turned it into a joke at your own expense, you left that person's brain with a slightly lower estimation of you than they arrived with. Because they watched you receive a positive assessment of yourself and reject it. And on some level, consciously or not, they updated their view to match yours. Here's the replacement. When someone acknowledges something you did well, 2 words, "Thank you." That's the whole sentence. Not "thank you," but "I had a lot of help." Not "thank you, I don't know how it came together." Just "thank you." Full stop. Let the compliment exist. Let them give it to you completely without handing it back. It will feel arrogant at first. It won't look arrogant from the outside. It will look like someone who knows their own value without needing to announce it or deny it. That is exactly the impression you want to be leaving. The fourth habit is deeply connected to the work we did in our last 2 episodes because it lives at the intersection of decision-making and communication. And it's one of the most common ways that otherwise strong, intelligent people telegraph insecurity without realizing it. It's the habit of seeking validation for decisions you've already made. Here's what it looks like. You've made a decision. Maybe you've decided to take a different approach on a project. Maybe you've concluded that a meeting isn't necessary. Maybe you've set a limit with someone in your personal life. The decision itself is sound. You've thought it through. You know it's the right call. And then you present it to someone else, and the sentence ends with, "Does that make sense?" Or, "Is that okay with you?" Or, "What do you think?" Not because you genuinely want input, but because you're uncomfortable with the possibility that they might disagree. And you're preemptively trying to diffuse that tension. And here's the thing. On the surface, that seems considerate. It seems collaborative. But what you're actually doing is transforming a decision into a negotiation. You're opening the door to a conversation that didn't need to happen. You're communicating very clearly that your decision is not yet final, that it's subject to revision based on their reaction, and that their approval is a condition you need met before you can fully stand behind your own choice. People who hold authority don't do this. They inform. They explain when explanation genuinely serves the other person's understanding, not when it serves their own need for reassurance. And when they've decided something, they present it as decided. There's a difference between saying, "I've decided to take the project in a different direction. Here's why," and saying, "I've been thinking we might want to take the project in a different direction. What do you think? Would that be okay?" The first statement invites engagement with a settled thing. The second one invites the other person to reopen what you've just said. And whoever you're talking to will take that invitation, because you handed it to them. In the previous episode, we talked about the clean no. The same principle applies here to decisions across the board. State them like they're real, because they are. And if you've genuinely decided something, the most respectful thing you can do, for both of you, is present it that way. Now, the fifth habit is different from the others, and in some ways, it's the subtlest of all, because it doesn't involve words you say. It involves words you choose not to say, and specifically, a kind of conversational overcrowding that happens when people are so anxious to be thorough, so afraid of being misunderstood, that they bury their own most important points under layers of context and qualification and explanation. We'll call it over-explaining. And it is quietly one of the most common ways authority bleeds out of a person. Here's how it works. You have something to say. You have a point to make, or a position to hold, or a conclusion to deliver. And instead of saying it, you build a structure around it. You give the background first, then the considerations you weighed, then the potential objections and why they don't apply. Then finally, somewhere in the middle of a very long paragraph, you say the actual thing, and then you support it with more explanation, and then you circle back to preemptively defend it against responses you haven't received yet. By the time you're done, the core of what you said is almost undetectable, not because it wasn't valuable, because it was surrounded by so much protective scaffolding that the listener had to do exhausting work to find it. And what the listener registers, consciously or not, is that you don't trust your own point to hold up without a tremendous amount of fortification. Precision is power. The ability to say the most important thing in the fewest words necessary is one of the rarest and most impressive communication skills there is. It signals that you know exactly what you think, that you've already done the internal work, that you're not figuring it out in real time by talking your way through the uncertainty. The practice is this. Before you speak, identify the one thing you actually want to land, not the 5 things that are contextually related to it. The one thing. Say that first, and then stop. If the other person needs more, they'll ask. If they don't ask, the context wasn't as necessary as you thought. Lead with the conclusion. Support it only if needed, and trust the clarity of your own thinking enough to let it stand without surrounding it with a defensive perimeter. Here's what all 5 of these habits have in common. At their root, every single one of them is a strategy for managing other people's reactions. The upward inflection, the filled silence, the self-deprecating joke, the request for approval, the over-explained position. They're all different versions of the same move. They're attempts to pre-manage how you'll be received, to soften your edges so much that no one could possibly have a negative reaction. because there's almost nothing left to react to. And the tragedy is that this strategy achieves the opposite of what it intends. Instead of making people like you more or trust you more, it communicates something very precise. It communicates that you are not entirely certain you belong in the conversation at your current level, and people treat you accordingly. Not out of cruelty, not even consciously, just out of instinct. Because human beings are wired to take their cues about your value from the signals you yourself are broadcasting. Your words are your brand, not occasionally. Every time you open your mouth. And the 5 habits we talked about today are quietly running a campaign that undersells you in every room you enter, every day, whether or not you're aware of it. Cut the uptalk. Sit in the silence. Accept the compliment. State the decision. Lead with the point. These aren't communication tricks. They're the external expression of something internal. They're what it sounds like when a person has decided, all the way down, that what they have to say is worth saying clearly. That shift doesn't happen overnight, but it starts the first time you catch yourself mid-sentence. Recognize one of these patterns and choose differently. One conversation at a time, until the new way doesn't feel like a performance anymore, until it just feels like you. Next time, we're going back into the psychology of money. We're going to look at the specific cognitive errors, the ones buried deep in how your brain processes reward and risk, that keep smart, hardworking people financially stuck, regardless of how much they earn. It's not about budgeting. It's not about discipline. It's about the operating system underneath all of it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it.